All right. All right. We're going to get started now. Welcome, everyone. We are honored to have Fergus O'Carroll, the host and creator of the On Strategy Showcase. As you see there, where strategists tell the stories behind the thinking that led to amazing work. One of my favorite podcasts, and hopefully you as well have listened to both these podcasts that we're going to discuss today. And at the end, we will open it up to questions and answers. So let's, without further ado, take it away, my friend Fergus. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I have the big microphone, so this is the only microphone I have, so forgive me for that. Um, this is a little awkward because I don't know any of you, so I don't know what your real interests are. So I may just kind of screw up here by getting off into sidetracks that don't interest you. But if you've listened to both of the episodes, I think we might have a good conversation around them. So, first of all, is like, why did I pick those two episodes? And the first one, Cadbury, is sort of a challenge to what has become sort of a sort of a theory in and a well-supported theory in marketing, which is that we need to make our brands famous. And as a result of that, like everybody who's very fickle in this industry, we lack such originality that we just do what everybody else is doing. So everybody's like, okay, we need to be famous. So we have to chase fame. But there's a danger in chasing fame. And I think Cadbury is a great example of that. The other one is Oatly. And with Oatly, it's about sort of being brave, and it's being irreverent, and it's being different, and it's being purposefully different. And I think Oatly is very much like a brand you all may be familiar with more recently called Liquid Death. This is this water brand, and they've kind of shaken everything up and have managed to do what everybody thought was possible but had never seen done before, which was coming into a category that's cluttered, that's commodified to the ultimate degree, water, for Christ's sake. And they have turned it into this sort of powerhouse brand based upon packaging and tone of message. So there's a reason why that works and why that doesn't work. And we're going to talk a little bit about that when we get to that case. But I first wanted to talk a little bit about how I make this damn machine work. Okay, here we go. We have on the show brands from all around the world, and it's not just brands that are doing award-winning work, but it's also brands that are doing interesting things. And so we get the opportunity to talk with the clients and the strategists, and we record them. A lot of these are available as written cases, but not everybody likes to read. So I've really enjoyed the idea of being able to do the aspect of planning that I love. I've loved the most in my career, which is the part of interviewing people and asking questions and getting behind the sort of the veneer of answers, because a lot of in marketing is about just the veneer, and people stop at the veneer, so they get it wrong. And you have to be able to and willing to dig behind it. And that's where people talk about curiosity as being a big sort of personality trait that's really important in planners. And it's true, and it's trivialized, but it's true. And you really need to be willing to sort of push it and not accept assumptions, because they can be incredibly dangerous. So why did I start the show? This is a great example why 765 entries in the Cannes Creative Strategy Awards this year, and only 17 were recognized. Does that mean that the rest of them were crap? No. The rest of them are probably equally as strong, and maybe they lost by a point or two in the judging panel. I'm really interested in making sure that the others are included, and it always frustrated me that so much work goes into this, and so much can be learned from cases that don't become award winners, yet we don't get to hear about them, and it's ridiculous. Nobody publishes them. So we become this sort of culture of the awarded become the most recognized. And that just sets the wrong tone, because there's lessons to be learned from every single case. A couple of things that I've learned from the best people that I've talked with: collaboration is everything. Now, when I was coming up in this industry, this was not suggested as being the thing that you needed to be most aware of. We were always told that your job was to come up with the creative brief. Your job was to do the research. And when you had that brief, the brief needed to come down from high, like Moses with the tablets, right? And you have to come down with that creative brief. But that's the completely wrong way to do it. What happens is that people read that brief and they disagree with it, and then that brief gets trashed, because we're an industry of egos, and the strongest ego, the strongest voice always wins. So if you're not collaborating with creative teams, with account management, with clients from the very earliest stages, and not being precious about your creative brief, you stand a much better chance of, number one, progressing in your career, number two, being successful in strategy in terms of developing a strategy that might work, and number three, in producing work that produces results and that everybody feels a sense of ownership of. And you've got to get that. This sort of idea of the lone wolf being the hero in marketing is wrong. The lone wolf eats last, or the lone wolf dies. And so you've got to be a type of a personality that's willing to show your weaknesses, to say when you don't know the answer, to engage with your colleagues in an agency and say, hey, how about, here's my initial thoughts, what do you think? And then everybody gets ownership of it, and then everybody will advocate for it. So it's a hugely important point. This is another one, which is there's no one way to plan. And I think that in marketing, there's always somebody with a process suggesting that this is the best way to do it. And it's important to have a basic understanding of process and a way of approaching when you're starting out in your career. But once you get underway, I always encourage people not to stick to it. You will organically learn what's best for you to do. And once you've learned the very fundamentals, you can go outside of the lines, because you kind of have to. Otherwise, you'll end up producing work that everybody else produces. Process and that whole idea of approaches, it kills originality. So learn your basics, get a fundamental understanding, and then start screwing with it is the best way to do it. Nobody in the industry likes process. Only the agency owners, some authors, will advocate for a single process. It is not what the best work is being based upon. Another thing is we're all, well, I used to be young, but we are a young industry, and we get sort of fixated on what we think is cool. And the problem is that the cool factor sort of lives on the edges of culture, but it's not reflective of the middle of culture. And it's very dangerous to get stuck on the edges, because most brands are not just interested in edge culture. They want to understand the middle mainstream. So you have to keep yourself objectively with an eye in both sections, so that ultimately you're able to be objective. Otherwise, you're just creating shit for yourself. And the reality is that we're not the audience. And we end up in this sort of fishbowl thinking approach if we do it that way. And it's the way a lot of advertising is done, that we're creating advertising and marketing for ourselves. It's not conscious to the sensibilities of the mainstream. And if your brand wants that mainstream target, and of course your client tends to be educated and college educated, like you will be, and they tend to think the same way. They tend to think about their fishbowl world, but you've got to push them out of it and get them to a better place. And we're going to talk about that, particularly with Cadbury. 18 to 40-year-olds represent just under a third of the adult population, but account for a staggering 84% of the agency workforce. So you can see there that that's a problem, and that there needs to be a better balance struck. So let's talk about our first campaign. You guys would have heard about this. This is Cadbury. It's an English chocolate brand. And what I loved about this is this brand has been around for 100 years, but in the advertising and marketing world, it became very famous in 2007 for an ad called Gorilla. And the industry applauded that campaign, thought it was phenomenal. And I don't know if you guys have seen the spot, but I'm going to play the spot for you in a second. But I hope I can get over to that side of the screen. How do I get rid of these boxes? Shit, how do I do this? Anyway, I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I'll figure it out. But there was a spot called Gorilla, and it was so out of left field that it became famous. Everybody was playing it. Everybody was requesting it. It made major hits on national media. Let me see if I can get rid of this. How do I get rid of this goddamn thing? Hang on.
Just so you know, Fergus, I did in an email sent out to everyone yesterday. I included all the spots.
Okay,
Gorilla
good.
was the first one. So the students that were on the ball there saw those spots.
Okay,
Everyone
good.
that
So
you
that
had
will help.
in
That
the
will help.
episode, just so you know, they did see it.
Great. Okay, so you saw Gorilla, and it was very unique and very interesting, but it was out in left field, and so as a result, it got an awful lot of earned media. So people picked up on it in the press. Everybody was writing about it. People were talking about it. It was very successful. But the challenge was that that Gorilla led to this idea of chasing fame. And this spot I want to play for you now was a follow up to Gorilla, and I want to point out that this spot is an example of the problem with chasing fame without a strategy. You end up sort of looking for things that'll go viral, and you're losing sight of what the brand is all about. This is an example. I hope it'll play for us here. Hopefully you can hear it. 1 second here. Pre-rolls ads suck. Yeah. Here it is. Now, she's wearing the purple dress, so there's a brand cue. So that gives you a sense for what began to happen, is that they began to create work that was designed to go viral, that was designed to create buzz. But the problem was that they began to realize that they weren't chasing a strategy, they were chasing fame. And it began to lead the brand into what was a very dangerous place. So there was a decision made after the takeover when Kraft took over the brand in 2010. And a lot of things started to happen to that brand, the declining sales, bad reputation, a lot of problems in policy circles. The business began to take a nosedive. So as you heard in the episode, there was this idea of getting away from this idea of fame. So they returned back to the core brand values and began to realize the importance of developing a strategy. So they went back to this idea that founded the company. Now this is obviously a small group of people that are facing a bad business situation. They go back to the core foundation of what the company was built upon, which was the spirit of generosity. And what they began to look at is what was happening in culture at that time that would allow them to figure out how to frame generosity that would connect with people in modern times. And if you remember, of course, there was this huge polarization happening around that time. It was happening here in the US too, politically. There was a lot of problems going on with unemployment. There was this general sense that we were a sort of a selfish society. And so they began that way to find a way to create a context in which this brand could make sense to people. So they asked this question, which I can't see on screen anymore, but what's the role of a generous brand in a world that is increasingly selfish? And if you can get to a small question or statement like that, it becomes sort of a guidepost for everything that you do going forward. And it captures the spirit of the way that you want the brand to be. And a lot of the characteristics of Cadbury and this idea of a generous spirit make sense. They're kind of universal. They make sense across time. And you can certainly say, well, can't every brand leverage this idea of generosity? And the answer is yes, any of them could. But generally what happens when a brand grasps that characteristic and makes it their own, there's a tendency for other brands to stay away from it. And so I think that's an important thing to realize, because in a lot of strategy presentations, a client might say, but anybody could say that. And it is true at the end of the day that anybody could say anything. But the question is, will they when they see you do it? And the answer 9.5 times out of 10 is no, they won't bother doing that. They'll look for a more fertile space. So Cadbury went after this observation which in retrospect is incredibly obvious, right? That generosity exists in all of us. And it was the idea that even though we're becoming very tribal in culture and in politics and in society, where you're a Republican or you're a Democrat, where you're a progressive or you're a conservative, whether you're a Honda owner or a Toyota owner, whatever those polar opposites are, underneath the surface, just underneath the surface, if you scratch a little bit, there is this idea of people being generous, and those acts of generosity, they people want to be associated with that. They do that. They know that is part of who they are as humans. So it was sort of an unlock for them to be able to say, okay, we want to move from a brand that tells sort of famous stories or stories that are entertaining to telling stories now that are more human and that connect people to each other. So it's that distinction between that. It was almost like joy was the platform that they were building on before, and entertainment. And now they were shifting to generosity and connection and human belonging and human stories. So that's what you begin to see as you look at what the brand evolved into. And I want to play the spot that I think you guys you probably saw the first spot about Mother's birthday. If those links were sent around, but I want to play you one other, and hopefully there isn't a damn pre-roll ad, so bear with me. This is one called Fences.
Yeah, we don't see or hear anything, just so you know.
You
on
don't
our
see
side.
it? Oh shit! What the hell's going
Now,
on?
I did
You can see
believe.
that?
No, we always, all I see on the screen is a black. It says black, and there's the Apple logo up at the top. It's not
Oh
playing
shit! That's
through
crazy.
this Zoom thing.
Okay, so that's a shame. Okay, am I back up on screen now?
Yeah, but return to the
Okay.
brand score. Yes, sir.
All right. So sorry about that. So these were both spots that we played in the episode, and they were reflective of these real human stories. The fence one is there's this man in his backyard, and the kids next door are doing sort of what might be considered annoying things and throwing things back over. He's throwing their paper planes back over. He's throwing their ball, all the stuff that we see in everyday life. And so these were spots that began to look at these human stories through this lens of generosity. And when this campaign launched, sales began to go dramatically up again. So the question is, why is that happening? And I think that it's happening because they went back to sort of universal human stories and away from the more contrived overall look. And it's had a significant impact on their business going forward. And you could also say that the more humorous, edgy stuff, again, to the point we made earlier, those edgier work, while it may get talked about, it doesn't mean that it connects with the mass mainstream. And when you're a CPG brand like Cadbury, or if you're over here with Twix, or you're over here with Dove and other candy bars, or if you're Snickers, you have to do things that work for the larger market. So there's no interest in edgy work. And if you look at Snickers and the whole idea of you're not yourself when you're hungry, it's a brilliant campaign. It's been going on for a very long time. That continues to work, but it works for the mainstream, and it does it in a really interesting way. Let me see if I can get back on. This was a store that they referenced. You may remember that they referenced the glass and a half store. And so this is an idea of what you hear about brand activation, maybe when you're studying cases. This was a great example of a brand activation. In the mother's birthday story, the little kid, she pays with these little trinkets, her little jewelry, her fake jewelry, and her little toys. And that's in the TV spot. They then opened up a store in London that allowed people to do the same thing, which was to bring in their little trinkets and the little toys, and they could buy candy bars with that. So that was a wonderful opportunity as a brand activation, and it also created a ton of press. And as you guys probably know through your studies, that the desire of most marketers is to get more through earned media rather than paid media. And with the connectivity that exists through social and through other platforms, You can do that if your idea is solid, because everybody's looking for a story to tell. And earned media requests are creating an enormous market for these sorts of activations. Now, the activation itself, maybe it got a couple of hundred people that came into that store over the time it was there. It's never about what happens at the store. It's about what happens around the store, meaning that it gets publicity. So when you do these types of things, you've got to keep in mind that you want it to go, you want it to generate an awful lot of buzz. So you design it in order to do that. So it's a great activation. The other last point I wanted to make about this was, and we're going to talk more about this as we get into Oatly, is this idea of taking things from the lighthearted human stories that are sort of they are warm and comforting, to then taking them into a more serious topic, which is what they also did with Cadbury. It was this idea of being able to connect with a cause and to use that as a way to activate against different audiences and different human emotions. So this was an idea called Donate Your Words. You may remember it came up in the actual in the episode. And since we can't play this, it's unfortunate. But this was a gentleman. The whole theme was loneliness. It was the recognition that loneliness was a huge issue amongst the elderly in the UK, as it is here in the US. There's a tendency when we aren't connecting with people through life that we ignore them. We no longer engage people in conversation. We're looking down at our phones. We're not connecting. We're not having conversations with people. We're afraid almost. We're resistant to engage in conversations with other people because we're in a hurry, or we don't know where the hell the conversation is going to lead us. And so we don't do it. So what they did here is they created a partnership with this nonprofit and began to tell these stories about these individuals who are dealing with loneliness after the loss of a spouse or other reasons, or just living alone. And the chocolate bars themselves were printed on empty wrappers. There was no words on the wrappers. And I think they produced about 10 million bars, and they sold out pretty quickly. But it was about the idea of donating your words, that by making the donation, not of your money, but just of your words, in creating conversations with people. So to kind of signal that as a brand, they produce all of these candy bars with no words on them. So it was another great idea of connecting in, but it does sort of, it is a territory that brands have to be careful of, because getting into serious topics can have a backlash effect. And if you can't show credibility in the area that you're talking about, or if it seems like it's contrived, it can cause a backlash against your brand. So with that in mind, I want to talk to you about Oatly, which was the second one, and we'll click through this one pretty quickly because I know we've got a relatively short period of time. But Oatly, that episode was, I think, recorded about 1.5 years ago. And at that time, it was a great example of strategy at work in a rather sort of unexpected, non-traditional way. And that's what I really liked about it, and having it as a show. So Oatly, as you may remember, it was one of the original oat milk brands. Now they're everywhere. And Oatly had been in Europe, and it was coming into the US. And it was starting to be circulated or distributed through, or not distributed, but used in the entire Starbucks franchise chain in North America. So Oatly was not known as a brand. So I think my sense is that there was sort of a suggestion by Starbucks that their brand needed to be better known, or that there needed to be some form of communication to create that. And Starbucks itself was not going to do it. And they needed to justify and create pull-through for oat milk at retail, in the Starbucks store, should I say. So Oatly did not have a lot of money. So what they were doing was being able to create this sort of irreverent, non-traditional ad that they ran. And as a challenger in the US, they knew that they had a couple of choices. They could do something that was very practical, which was try to educate people about oat milk, or they could go in a completely different direction. And that's the direction that they went with, which was a brand that had sort of a tonality of being very subversive, very irreverent, very punk as they talk about it, and purposefully different. And I don't mean brand purpose. I mean they were deliberately different, and they chose to do it that way. Now that doesn't work a whole lot, and I think it was built on the sort of the recognition that, because a lot of companies, and you guys will come across this a lot when you get into this industry, it's a very risk adverse industry, and anything that can't demonstrate that it's been done before, and you can't show data that it's going to work, which is pathetic at the surface level, that we're being forced to do things that have already been done, meaning there's a lack of originality, there's a lack of willing to be different, and that we're only going to be followers as brands. So you can imagine, as an industry, that's incredibly difficult for us to deal with, because we want to do what's new, not just for the sake of being new, but for the sake of breaking through in a productive, effective way. And there's too much risk aversion in the industry. So I think what Oatly understood really was that the real risk for them was not being noticed at all. And the sense was, if they went into the Super Bowl and did something that was Super Bowl-like or was practical, it would be like most ads in the Super Bowl the next day, where nobody can remember the damn ad, and nobody can remember who the ads were even provided, which brands were behind the ads. If you talk to people after the Super Bowl, maybe they'll remember 2 or 3 ads which were their favorites, but I guarantee you that the majority of those people won't remember which brand produced that ad. That's a real problem in our industry about attribution. Nobody can attribute it to a brand. Nobody missed. Very few people missed this, and I think it's the credit is due to the fact that in this case, the tone was created by a partnership between their head of marketing or their head of creative and the CEO. It only works well when that happens. That's why Patagonia works. That's why REI works. That's why Ben & Jerry's works. That's why Oatly worked. It was because the CEO was in agreement with the head of marketing that they needed to do this. That is very rare in our industry. And when that is not in place, the risk to a person's career and generally to the overall effectiveness of the work is jeopardized. And so it's important that everybody is aligned internally. So they knew they couldn't outspend, so they had to outmaneuver. And the launch for Starbucks was in March, so they ended up picking the Super Bowl as the easiest way, although it's incredibly expensive, but it's the easiest way to get national audience in a very quick, in a quick hit. And that's what they built it around. So I'm going to assume that you've seen this Super Bowl spot. It ran in January, and it is literally just a lockdown shot of their CEO, which you see right there in front of you. And it's him singing a song. And it was, I remember my reaction to it was, what the hell is this spot? I was actually angry about it. I thought, and I still do it to a degree, feel that if you're going to do something that is memorable for the right idea, rather than doing it for a bizarre idea. Now, I get that this was extraordinarily successful by Oatly's determination. I don't know that it was outside of that. I don't know that people still remember what that was, or if there's a really broad-based recognition of the Oatly brand. But it definitely worked in terms of earned media promotion. It definitely worked in terms of generating buzz. It definitely worked at taking negative things said about the brand and about this ad and turning them into positives for some people. But I struggle between when brands sort of open themselves up to criticism. And Liquid Death has done the same thing, that water brand. Liquid Death will sort of wake up every Monday morning, and when they look at their social feeds, they want at least 50, this is their words, they want at least 50% of the comments to be negative. They don't think things are positive unless people sort of hate them, because it makes the people who like them even more. And so they love that and their work is so stripped down, Liquid Death, and so provocative and so irreverent and so wacky that you can't but forget it. The question becomes for Liquid Death, as it does for Oatly, what next? It's not going, you can't always be, you have to evolve your definition of quirky. You have to grow with your audience. And so it's going to be interesting to see in the next couple of years, what does Liquid Death begin to evolve into? Does it mature in a certain way? Does Oatly begin to mature in a certain way? So those are things to keep an eye on as the businesses continue to grow and evolve. Coming off of the Super Bowl ad, they knew that they were going to get a lot of hate mail. They actually shared the spot in advance with a lot of people so they could generate some hate. And then they actually had people on the day of the Super Bowl deliver these T-shirts to people who were providing negative and posting negative comments, all with the idea of generating more earned media. Obviously, they spent a ton of money on that spot, but people are doing this outside of the Super Bowl in order to gin up negative comments, in order to gin up earned media coverage. And so it's the basic idea that no news is bad news. And that works, I think, 9 times out of 10, but it can snap back at your ass from time to time. These are some examples of their ads, which I love. I love this part of Oatly. I love the irreverence. I love the fact that this has got nothing to do with the product. I think this is super smart, and I love their approach to it. It's great work. There's no doubt about it. It's great work, and they use space and they waste space beautifully. They do a phenomenal job at that. But the question for them is going to be, how do you strike the balance between personality and activism? And if you listen to the episode, you probably heard Heidi and I talking about the sort of the climate crisis factors, the issues of global warming that they were in support of, that they were trying to be active against. But none of their work really touches on that. And I think they're deliberately not doing that, recognizing that it might create a backlash against their business. I haven't seen personally any initiatives or any of their marketing talking about that sort of activism side of the brand in the way that Patagonia does it, and in the way that other brands like Ben & Jerry's do it. They have not done that yet. So I'm just wondering how that's going to play out. And I'm not even sure it's necessary, but it is something they talk about. So I think at some point there needs to be proof points around it. So those are 2 examples of episodes. So one that's an established brand that needed to sort of course correct off of a modern day theory in marketing, which is chasing fame. And they course corrected back to the fundamentals of their brand and did it in a way that connected with modern culture and was about this idea of human storytelling rather than entertainment. And then you have in Oatly a brand that was a challenger brand in a category that was doing everything against the norms of advertising and doing them incredibly well. And I think, recognizing that going against the grain can be really, really powerful if done the right way. So I'm gonna stop there. I don't know what the hell I'm sorry I went on. Maybe I went on a little longer, maybe not.
Oh, it's great. So here's what we'll do. You could take yourself off mute if you want to ask a question, or you could drop it in the chat box and I will read it out, whatever is easier. Here's your opportunity to speak with our this amazing podcaster and marketer, advertising person. So ask away. Who wants to go first?
I have a question. So in terms of brands like chasing fame, how do you feel about celebrity endorsements and influencer endorsements? And how do brands differentiate themselves from other brands doing celebrity endorsements?
I'm not against any of that. I think it goes back to the point that sort of came up during Cadbury, which is fame is not a strategy. So you need a strategy, and then you can execute it in a way that's designed to achieve fame. So if you are a brand that's after generosity as a brand platform, there's nothing wrong with aligning with celebrities who have that same goal in mind, who have that same reputation as that. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And in terms of the differentiation has to come from the brand, not from the celebrity. You have to establish that initially yourself. Otherwise, it's just a promotion, and it ends up being a promotion for the celebrity more than it is for the brand. So you've got to know who you are as a brand, and then the collaborations feel more organic.
Hold on, I got a question in the chat. Do you think more indirect ads like Oatly's street art ad is the way to go? For the person posing the question, they notice these ads more than the more direct ones. Indirect ads like Oatly street art, the out of home stuff.
Yeah, I do. I think that there's the greatest risk, as we talked about, is not being noticed. And I think once brands begin to talk too much about themselves, we immediately shut it off unless it's enormously compelling. And enormously compelling ads don't tend to be about the product. So I love what Oatly is doing because it actually engages you more than a more descriptive product features and benefits, or product features based ad. So I'm a huge fan of that. I think the best work is the one that allows you to see yourself in the ad rather than you seeing the product in the ad or the product talking about itself. I think that's a universal truth.
Okay, anybody else? Who's next? Come on.
I have a question.
Okay, awesome.
So kind of going off what you're saying about Oatly, if like an ad isn't like successful relative with like sales, if it still achieves exposure and like secondhand earned media, do you still think it's successful?
It can be. Oh, I gotta get a lot of feedback here. I think that you've got to have. I think there's a growing movement in the industry when you hear these terms called performance media and brand marketing. So performance marketing and brand marketing. So the performance marketing is, designed to create immediate response. So to create and drive to transaction. Other marketing or brand marketing is looking at the longer term. So smart marketers recognize that there's only so many people that are in the market right now to buy your product. And if somebody doesn't want your product or whatever that category of product is, if they don't want dish soap right now, you're not going to force somebody to buy dish soap because of your ad. So you can only expect that a certain percentage of the market is ready for transaction right now. And there is ads that you would design toward that. And certainly Oatly's are not that. They're not designed to create transaction right away. They're designed to build the brand for the longer term. So as more people come into the market for the product at various times, maybe it's a week from now or 2 weeks or 3 months or whatever, a year, depending on your category, that they're familiar with your brand, that they associate it with the category. So you're really designing two types of ads as a marketer. One for driving transaction, which tends to be more digitally focused ads. That are more, well, and I'm not saying that digitally focused ads are all about transaction driving, but most of them are. But it's ones that are designed to drive transaction now. That's not Oatly, and none of them were designed to do that. But you do have both. You have to have both, and I think that you have to attribute an end result to both of them, and not expect that Oatly is going to drive transaction right away. Because one other point would be that Oatly has a lot of respect for the customer. They're not beating you over the head with their message, but also a lot of that work was about driving awareness of the brand, so that people, when they saw it at Starbucks, would be comfortable with it as an alternative. So there was a different objective going in.
All right, here's a question. Thank you. What are some of the more memorable or impactful campaigns that you've talked about on your podcast? Any ones that you especially go back to, as far as and you've covered some of the classic campaigns, as well as some of these wonderful brand new ones, like the new McDonald's campaign. Is there any one that you particularly enjoy?
I love the Cadbury. I love Guinness. I love Yorkshire tea. I love Apple. I love Citibank. And what I love about all of those is that they have a long-term story. They're super smart. They're very deliberative. They're very disciplined, and the work is great. The creative work is great. As a strategist, I always want to see work that makes sense. It's not just created because it's like a cute execution or it's a great idea, but it needs to be an idea that's rooted in the business's objectives, that's actually going to demonstrate that there's results that come out of it, that it performs well in market. We have a terrible habit in our industry of being the judges of work ourselves, rather than judging the effectiveness and our sense of celebration around business growth. We need to shift that. It's a real problem in the business. There's too many people that are sort of building campaigns out or executions out so that they can get it into Cannes and they can win an award for creative, which has got nothing to do with effectiveness, just about creativity. And I love that shit too. I mean, I came up loving that stuff too. I remember when I was coming up, the Effies were like something that you really begrudgingly entered into. You wanted to be in the One Show. You wanted to be in CA Annual, the Clios. These are the places where you wanted to be. You wanted to be at Cannes because you were very singular focused on creative. So all of those campaigns I mentioned are ones that have got really smart thinking, great strategic thinking, great execution, and they're phenomenal in how they use the how they frame sentences. One of the things that we forget about is that the skill of a strategist is selecting words that are rich with emotion and meaning, and doing it in a really interesting way in framing sentences. And English planners are brilliant at this. This is why English strategists are probably the most popular strategists around the world, even though it pisses off the Americans. It is true. And I think whatever the education system is that these girls and guys are coming out of, and the culture of the advertising and marketing world in the UK and in Australia, they're phenomenal. They're phenomenal, and they do some of the best work. And we have a lot of catching up to do in the U.S. And a lot of the great work in the U.S. that's being done, it's been done by English planners. It's hard for me to do shows where I have enough American voices in it, and it frustrates me. And so I'm constantly looking for new voices. So we have a lot of catching up to do in the U.S. I find a lot of the great work is coming overseas.
Okay, another question. Between you have Fame on one side and Brave on the other. Between these strategies, is there one or the? Should you go for Fame or should you go for brand? I know Bob Hoffman, the ad contrarian, says his brief is "Make me famous." So that's his belief, that that's the goal of ads. What is your belief? Because clearly the brave companies that like Liquid Death, like Oatly, are succeeding.
Yeah, it's got to do with it's not so much that the opposite of fame is bravery. It's about chasing fame, and if you're chasing fame and it's not on strategy, then that's a bad idea, and that's what Cadbury is an example of. And unfortunately, fame can be is thought about from a popularity perspective, that you want to drive yourself very quickly into popular culture. And so people are like, we need to go viral. We need earned media right away. So there's a tendency to sort of go, okay, this is a great idea, but it's not really on strategy, but it would really make a big impact. And so maybe we should just do it. And so then what happens is you begin to get addicted to the little crack pipe of fame. And as you begin to develop the next ad and the next ad, you get further and further away from strategy. And that's what happened with Cadbury. I think with Liquid Death, I worry about where that's all going. And with somebody like Bob Hoffman, I think what Bob's saying is that you need to stick with a character or an execution, like Geico with the gecko, or like Meerkats in the UK. These are campaigns that have been running for years. And as they run, they become more popular and more well-known. They become sort of famous. They begin to be embedded into popular culture. That's the fame he's talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And the other fame is the guerrilla type fame for Cadbury, which is like big hit, and then we sort of get lost. So I'm not against fame. I think fame is important in terms of you want to become famous over time. And the opposite of fame is not brave. I think all advertising should be brave, and brave is not a something that exists on one end of the spectrum. I think that it's strategy that should underpin all of this. The Bob Hoffman is a different definition of fame in my mind.
All right, now how about, did you by chance see the Tubi TV commercial watching the Super Bowl? And if so, did you think it was good or was it too risky?
Again, I think that I saw that and I love that. And we've had Greg Hahn and the crew on about a lot of their work. That's smart to me, right? But I think that was like that was my theory is that was like Oatly in terms of something was probably happening in their business that they needed to get awareness up fast so that they could get either some collaboration or some agreement with a major media company or a distribution deal up fast. So there's nothing wrong with that idea. The problem is where has Tubi been since? And are people really going to remember that when they've been silent for 6 months or a year, and then they come back on again? I think that one of the things that's becoming more clear now is that we have to have a more consistent presence. If you want to build share, you've got to be spending a significant, you've got to be keeping in mind the share of voice that your competitors have, and you've got to be spending at least at levels of them in order, or you have to calibrate what you can expect to achieve in terms of share of market based upon who else is spending in the category. Because ultimately, do people begin to confuse Tubi with Sling? Oh, was that a Sling spot or a Tubi spot? Because they forget about it. So you can't come on fast and go dark. My sense is the reason they did that is because there was some business deal going on in the background.
All right. Let's make this the final question. Advice for students starting their marketing career. What would you share to some students that'll be seniors, some juniors going to graduate next year? Any advice that you could share would be appreciated.
Okay. I suppose the biggest thing would be that everybody always feels like they're an imposter. So the tendency that I have found with younger people coming into the business is at all points of my career, and when I came into it also, you have to realize that your lack of knowledge is your greatest power. You're a clean slate. And if you have some fundamentals that you've learned in college and through your courses, you have to realize that what we're all craving in the industry is objective perspective. So don't dwell on the fact that you have never done it before. Trust your instincts. Trust your points of view. Don't feel that you shouldn't speak up. You have to speak up. You have a responsibility to speak up. And you will learn through speaking up that you actually are contributing a lot more than you think. A lot of times when even at my point in my career, and actually more so now, I look around at what's being posted on social channels in our world of marketing, and some of the most basic pedantic shit that is written is the most popular stuff. And that bothers me, right? Because I'm like, have we not learned that that is just the very simplest of things? But I also have to check and remind all of you guys that that is the stuff that is sticky. That is the stuff in your generation that is going to help you. Don't think that you have to shut down and you can't say anything because you don't feel you have enough experience. The industry is full of young people that are learning everything again. Old guys like me, we've been around the block too many times and we're kind of cynical of this shit. But most of the people are not. They're younger. They're going through the exact same cycle we went through. So don't be quiet in meetings. Sit up, state your case, even if it's just your opinion. Say it, and you'll quickly learn that you're actually making more contributions or you're not than you think. Just don't wait to be asked to participate in anything. Be assertive, be confident. You will get knocked back a little bit, but that just happens in every career and at every stage. But if you stay quiet, you'll get forgotten. Don't act like a student. Act like you're a professor and have that confidence to do it. That would be my biggest single thing. And let me just think of anything else that would be good to yeah, the other thing I would say is one last brief thing is we're an industry that loves data and we're getting stuck in data. We're getting stuck in spreadsheet culture. And it's slowly beginning to loosen its grip on marketing, but it's still there. Now, what that does, though, is it creates a huge vacuum for objective perspective. We see this increasingly on the show and in real life. If you are a person who likes engaging with people in public, if you're a person who's standing in a supermarket and sees somebody struggling with which product to select out of whatever they're standing in front of, and you're willing to walk up to them and say, "Hey, I see you're trying to make a choice. What are you thinking about?" If you're somebody who's willing to do that and can bring that perspective into a meeting, that many times is worth more than a sample of 5,000 or 1,000 people in a quantitative study. And clients are increasingly craving that perspective. Get out into the real world, talk to real people, talk to them about what's going on in their lives, talk to them about how they're buying that car, talk to them about what's happening in their lives, and bring that perspective into meetings. And that will be an enormous currency for you guys because not enough people are doing it. And I think the industry is waking up to the fact that those sort of qualitative insights are many times the things that create brilliant strategy because they're at the heart of what this practice of strategy is supposed to be based upon. And to get some really great insights into that, you should listen to the Martin Weigel. Weigel is spelled Weigel. Martin Weigel and I have a podcast episode. He was the former chief strategy officer at Wieden & Kennedy in Amsterdam. He's now chief strategy officer at AMV BBDO in London. Brilliant mind. And we have a great conversation about the importance of getting out into the real world. I think it's well worth investing the time in hearing him talk about that.
One of my favorite quotes is, "A desk is a dangerous place from which to view the world." All right. Thank you so much, Fergus. I appreciate this. Now I'm going to stop the sharing because I like to get a picture of everybody. Hold on a second. Let me get rid of this. Oh, no, that's not what I want to do. I want to turn this down. No, that's not what I want to do. Come back, everybody. What did I do? Oh, come on. Go to Zoom. There we are. I'd lose everybody. Fergus, could you stop sharing the screen? I've lost.
I did actually. Let me see if I can.
We've lost all the people.
You know, just try that. Maybe does that help anything?
I don't know what's happened here. Huh, that's weird. All right. I don't know what happened. I think we might have lost the people. This Zoom
That's all
is.
right. I'm good. I'll send
My
you.
Zoom, the Zoom is wonky. I wanted to take a picture of everybody while this was going on. Now I'm irritated. Yeah, I don't know what happened there. Shoot. I guess we're not going to dial in. I really appreciate what you just did. It was awesome. I got 8 pages of notes. We will share the recording with the students, and I really thank you for that. And I'm going to have the students reach out to you and thank you, since I couldn't have them on the screen to say thanks when we clicked off.
Well, tell them that they can just connect with me on LinkedIn. That's the best.
Okay. Okay. Awesome.
I'd be happy to connect with everybody on LinkedIn. I don't do X anymore because of that asshole. So I'm sorry.
Right. I hear you. I don't either. All right. Thank you so much.
All right. Bye, everybody. Good luck.
Bye-bye.
Good luck with all your careers. You'll do brilliant. I'm
All
sure
right,
we'll
thank
meet
you.
again in the future. Bye.
Thanks. I don't know what happened there, man. I see Kyle. Hey, Kyle, what's up, man? I see you there. I don't know. This Zoom thing.
I got a screenshot of it for you with everyone's face.
Oh,
It showed up.
beautiful. Did it show up?
Yeah, for me it did.
Awesome, dude. Could you just send that to me over to email or text it to me? I give you my number.
Awesome.
610.
One
You could just
second.
text the picture. I
Okay.
appreciate that. 610-888-2702.
All right, I got it.
All right, Kyle. Thanks so much, man. Appreciate that. Hope you
Yeah.
enjoyed it. It was good. He's awesome. Check out more of his shows too. All right, my friend. I'll see you Monday. Thanks. Well, what's going on here?